In this lecture, we're going to focus on QVariantList and QVariantMap. When passing data back and forth between Qt++ and Qt-Quick, QVariantList is turned into an array on the Qt-Quick side, and QVariantMap is turned into an object in Qt-Quick. We're going to go to Qt Creator and play with us. Okay, here we are in Qt Creator. We are going to create our project. It's a Qt-Quick project, an empty one. We call it QVariantList and QVariantMap demo. Save it in the usual location. Hit next. Choose the Qt version you have installed. We choose the kit, the desktop one in our case, and finish. We want to put in our helper class. It's going to be called CPP class again. And it's going to inherit QObject. We go to the header. We want to include our classes of interest, QVariantList and QVariantMap. We are going to put in our public methods, Control-A, Control-I to align. One is going to pass data from QML to CPP. We are going to pass a QVariantList and a QVariantMap using QVariantList and QVariantMap. You can select one of the classes and hit F1 to go and read the information about the class if you want. Okay, you can do the same for QVariantMap here and open the documentation to see what the class is about. Okay, let's close the documentation. We also have another method to get QVariantList from CPP and get QVariantMap from CPP, and they return these classes respectively. In the private section of the class, we want to put in an object pointer, which is called QML root object. And from one of the past lectures, you may recognize that we used this when we called a JavaScript function from C++. We are going to do that in this demo here, just to practice how to pass these data types by calling a JavaScript function. So we need to provide a setter for this thing, if you remember. It's going to be this one. We are also going to provide a public slot to trigger the call to JavaScript. Now we need to implement these things. Add definition in CPP, repeat the same steps. And do the same for the slot here. We want to include a few classes in the CPP file. We also want to initialize our QML root object to null pointer to have it initialized. When we get data from QML, the variant list is an array. Let's put that in here. It is sent from QML as an array, and this is sent from QML as an object. I want to put this here so that you remember. We can print the data very easily, just like this. Okay, we can print the list by looping in like this, and we can print the map just like this. This is standard C++ stuff. We simply loop in the collection of keys and grabbing the data in the map at a given key, just like this. And we turn that to a string because they are represented as QVariants when they come in here. We can also build ourselves a variant list and return it in the get variant list from CPP method. This is just to have something to play with. You see that we return a decimal number, a color, a string, and an integer like this, and we can return it. And we're going to be able to print all this information in Qt-Quick. We can also get the variant map like this, Control-A, Control-I to align. We define it and we put in some data. And then trigger JS call, because our JavaScript method is going to take both a QVariantMap and QVariantList. We're going to create the data to put in. We create a list and a map like this. And we pass all these two data sets in the call to invoke method. We pass in the root object that we want to use. We pass in the name of the function that we want to call from the Qt-Quick side. And we pass in the arguments that we want to work with. Notice that we don't put in a return value like we did in one of the previous lectures because we are not interested in the return value. We can leave it out like this. Now that we have the class, we should go back to the main CPP file and modify it to use our CPP class. We're going to include QML context. We're going to include our class, standard stuff by now. We need to instantiate our object. And we need to come here and modify a little bit because we need to be able to have the QML file here loaded successfully to be able to call the root object. If we don't have anything in the root objects, we're going to return -1. But if we have something, we're going to say CPP class set QML root object, and we say engine root objects first. Now we can go to QML and use our magic. We want to change the title to QVariant, include Qt Quick controls because we're going to need a few buttons, and define our JavaScript function on the root level. It's nothing special really. We just have to make sure the name here matches the name that we called here, and they do match. Array object func, array object func. We pass in an array because the first parameter is a QVariantList, and this is what we have here. QVariantList is turned into an array, and QVariantMap is turned into an object on the Qt Quick side, and this is what we have here. And we loop through the array, printing each element, and we loop in the array of keys, and we print whatever it is that is stored in that key. This is how you do it. This is how you loop through an object in Qt Quick or JavaScript. We want to define the first button. It is nothing special really. It is a button that simply passes data to CPP. We are going to call the method pass from QML to CPP, which is what we defined here. If you go down inside it, follow symbol under cursor, you're going to see the method. It is simply going to print the list and the map. Let's run the application. And before we see it, you see that we are passing in the continents in here. So when we pass data to CPP, let's see what we have in here. They are calling CPP class, and it is not defined in here because we forgot to call set context property. I am glad Qt Creator reminded me. So we should say engine root context set context property. We should say CPP class here and pass in a reference to our CPP class that we defined in here. Let's run again. And by any luck, we're going to see our continents printed. Click here. Okay, you see a list item, Africa, and you see the map. It contains item John, Doe, and Earth, which is what we passed in here exactly. We passed in an array that should be transformed into a QVariantList and an object which should be turned into a QVariantMap on the C++ side in here. We want to go back to QML and put in a second button that is below the first button, Control A, Control I to align. And it says get variant list from CPP, and that's exactly what it does. It reads data from the C++ object that we exposed. It stores that in data, and we loop over the array displaying items like this. So what we should see is this list here. Okay, we should see 1, 2, 3, color, Qt is great, and 10 here. Let's run the application and see what we get. On the Qt Quick side, let's move this over, call this. You see that we have 1, 2, 3, we have a color, we have Qt is great, we have 10. We can store different value types. We want to go back to QML, put in a new button, that is going to read QVariantMap data. That data is going to be stored as an object, and we loop over it as an object, printing each element in the object. You can recognize the same pattern from the reading we did here for the object. It really is the same thing. We are just reading variant map data that we return in here. Let's run the application. We should see movie data. Let's do this. You see that the movie is Game of Thrones, the name is Jon Snow, and things like this. It really is easy to do. You just need to remember the data types and how they map together from Qt to C++ and vice versa. Now we want to practice a little more on calling a JavaScript method from C++ and combine that with passing QVariantList and QVariantMap. The way we do that, we're going to go back to QML and put in button number 4 like this, Control A, Control I to align. The button is going to trigger JS call, and that's exactly what it does. If we go to CPP class, we see that this is a public slot method, so it should be callable from QML. And what the method does, follow symbol and the cursor, it creates a variant list, which is an array on the Qt side. It creates a variant map, which is an object on the Qt side. And we call invoke method on QMeta object, passing in the parameters that we need. Remember that the QML root object has been set in the main CPP file after we load the QML file. Okay, what we expect when we run the application, let's go back to QML and try to explain. We are calling this method when we click on button number 4. The method is going to create our data types. It's going to call this method in JavaScript, and we are going to come back to QML and do what we do in here. We're going to print array to print object, and you already know all this, how it works. Let's run the application and see what we get. We call trigger JS call, and you see that printing array, we print the array, printing object, we print the object. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how you work with QVariantList and QVariantMap to pass data back and forth between Qt and C++. This is all for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. In the next one, we're going to recap what we saw in this chapter. I'll see you there.